Hey there everyone, AJ back again for the Mighty Gluestick channel. I make videos about Dungeons and Dragons lore full time and have a collection of hundreds of monster ecology and strategy videos on my channel. Over 300. If you like what I do, please consider subscribing as I upload at least twice a week. Since the Renaissance, satyrs have been represented as we see them today, a humanoid but with the legs at least of a goat and goat horns on their head. They are classic Greek and Roman mythological creatures in origin, but the satyrs of Dungeons and Dragons differ in a number of ways. First off, satyrs in D&D are not just males. They are a playable character race and widespread, truly pan-dimensional species who have been, next to elves, one of the most successful lifeforms to spread out from the Feywild. So, settle back, grab yourself a beverage and let's get deeply nerdy as we explore all things satyr. The satyr has appeared in all 5 editions of the Dungeons and Dragons role-playing game, first showing up in Gods, Demigods and Heroes published in 1976, then in the first Monster Manual the following year, where they are described as sylvan woodland inhabitants primarily interested in sport, such as frolicking, piping and chasing wood nymphs. The ecology of the satyr was detailed in Dragon Magazine number 155 in 1990, though much of that info is a bit out of date. The satyr was later detailed as a playable race in the Complete Book of Humanoids in 1993. In fact, this current edition and the 5th edition version of the playable satyr in the homebrew category, there's a really good write-up for it, marks the 5th version of a playable satyr race in the game's history. So the satyr has been part of D&D from the beginning, along with many other creatures derived from Greek myth and legend. So in the lore, where do they come from? Time and place are largely meaningless in the mythological fairy tale worlds of the Feywild, but we know that the satyrs, or fauns, were originally a crossbred offshoot of nymphs, dryads, and possibly the ancient Eladrin, green elves, or humans. It also seems very likely that there was something about these unions that always produced satyr offspring, with the original parentage only having a little bit of influence on the resulting offspring. This suggests to me that this was not a matter of genetics and biology alone, but that the satyrs were deliberately created by the Fey powers in order to serve them as heralds and messengers. This makes a lot of sense when you consider the traits of the average faun. They are bold, consummate explorers. They love to sing and dance and have dauntless and irrepressible natures that can transform in adversity into the strongest form of resolve or the wildest heroic abandon. Like half-elves, they tend to have a knack for diplomacy, and they are one of the few races who are equally at home among many of the civilized races. They know how to open doors, grease the right palms, bypass obstacles, and they sure as hell know how to party. Priests and clerics of Erevan Ilisir, Hanali Kanalil, Maliki, Shares, Sheila Periroyal, Sylvanus, and Sune all recognize the favour that gods pay to the gregarious satyrs. They who show up time and time again in their sacred texts and in the mythos as chosen messengers in many tales. So it seems logical enough that this is why they were created and the role the gods handed to them, which they were only too happy to accept. If a satyr accepts the role of a messenger, they can absolutely be relied on to get the task done. It is just in their nature to do that. They find it deeply satisfying. This is also there's additional associated traits they're notorious for. Satyrs are charming, witty, clever, and very smooth talkers. They often leave behind a string of broken hearts and quite a few half-fawn children, fleet of foot, hairy-legged and clever, but rarely knowing much about their father. Satyrs native to the Feywild often come back and abduct their children, taking them back to be raised among the Feyfolk, where they avoid any persecution or shame from the more bigoted mortal community. They are also subject to wanderlust, more so than most other races. Every new experience fills a satyr with a sense of wonder, and they crave wonder like a drug, constantly seeking out the next marvelous sight and delighting in getting into trouble and out of trouble in ways that make for great stories that they can tell others later over quite a few drinks. They're also prone to running rings around less clever people, particularly humans, who are so often gullible and have such interesting reactions to being pranked or conned. Satyrs never tire of seeing the moment on a human's face when it dawns on them they've just been thoroughly hoodwinked. They also delight in rumour and gossip, with a knack for sifting out those that are obviously false and those that are probably true. But they are clever enough to know the true value of information and tend to use it wisely. Otherwise, they might not get such a welcome as a guest next time they show up. If ever there was a race of natural-born bards, it is the Fauns, the lowlanders, or the forest or woodland satyrs. While those who have always gravitated towards exploration and living among the wonders of nature are often called the Highland Satyrs, who tend to have the most, shall we say, less gregarious individuals. Let's take a look at these two main cultural groups, different enough from each other to be called sub-races, but first the traits that all satyr share. First, note that the satyrs listed in the Monster Manual are male. This is because the satyrs you are liable to get into fights with are pretty much always the most hedonistic, raucous, and self-absorbed males. They tend to resort to violence and can have quite a nasty streak, particularly as they are very, very frequently in some state of heavy intoxication. Most satyrs are not total chads when they get drunk, but this is the bro fawns. The world revolves around their next drink, the next meal, and their next sexual escapade. Anything else is just going to fall into the categories of boring stuff or stuff you can fight. Despite being intoxicated, they don't suffer much impairment to their combat prowess, just to their better judgment. There is a deeper reason why some satyrs eventually go rogue like this, though, and it's explained in this bit of player character lore, and I quote from the homebrew: Satyrs believe that the fate that befalls all sentient creatures occurs for a reason. They believe that the winds of good fortune and ill fortune alike blow according to how every creature lives his or her life. When they have advantage, they never take it for granted, acknowledging that those who stood by their side and helped them live a fulfilling life. When things turn bad for them and their allies, they understand that this is simply because they haven't tried hard enough yet to tip the balance of fate in their favour. But what about then, despite their best efforts, life and the gods keep throwing them misfortune after misfortune? Bitterness and rampant drug abuse turn even the best into monsters. Satyrs are no exception. Combine that with the basic lusts that drive their baser instincts, and you can see how, while most fawns are fantastic people, some of them are very sick and twisted individuals who are a threat to everyone around them in one way or another. All fawn adults are medium-sized, at about just under 6 feet tall. They're broad-chested but fairly lean, despite their enormous appetite for food and drink. They are, on average, more agile than a human, with a racial bonus of +1 to dexterity. The more human-like woodland fawns have an impressive +2 to their charisma and have an inherent ability with fey enchantment. At first level, they know the vicious mockery cantrip. At third level, they can cast Charm Person once per long rest. At fifth level, they can cast Hypnotic Pattern once per long rest as a third level spell, using charisma as their spellcasting attribute. The Woodland Fawns share similar weaponry traditions to the elves, with proficiency in longbows, short bows, short swords, and spears, with the Highland Satyrs are proficient with great axes, hand axes, longbows, and long swords. Woodland Fawns are not going to fight anything at close range unless they have to, much preferring to use cover and their ability to hide, plus their proficiency with ranged weapons and magic, to take out a foe from a safe distance. If they have no choice but to fight at close quarters, they prefer to fence and take advantage of their dexterity with lighter weapons. They are the more like humans in attitude in their younger years, reaching maturity at about the same rate, but once they reach adulthood, the Fey nature means that they can live for up to 5 centuries, and as they watch other races have multiple generations living and dying, they come to attune more with the dwarven and elven point of view. That being said, the famous lust for life they have doesn't really ever diminish, and they never pass up the chance to have a good party. Not many races can drink like a dwarf, or get elves to throw off their usual reserve and frolic naked in the woods. In fact, the elves have a few sayings about fawn parties. What goes on at fawn parties stays at fawn parties, that sort of thing. All satyrs have pretty powerful legs. They add their dexterity modifier to their jumping distance and have a base speed of 35 feet per round. Mountain satyrs have a much more bestial appearance. Their body is more hairy, they may have goat-like faces, and in many instances, transformative magics over the course of their lives turn them into fully goat-headed creatures who are much stronger, though often corrupted by dark powers. Mountain satyr they add 2 points to their constitution and have a mountain goat's sure-footed nature, able to move freely over rough or difficult terrain. Plus, they tend to charge at foes. Now, although it is a strong cultural tradition among their own small tribes, they don't tend to headbutt people with their horns in combat, though if disarmed and left with no other options, it can be a very effective attack. All satyrs have horns that inflict 1d6 plus their strength bonus in bludgeoning damage, and they are naturally proficient in using them as a weapon, of course. Mountain satyrs, given enough room, can make a charge attack, so when they use their action for the round to dash, they can use a bonus action to make one melee weapon attack, such as a strike with their horns, or to shove the creature. If they move at least 10 feet in a straight line immediately before taking this bonus action, they can either gain a +5 bonus to the attack's damage roll, or, if they don't use their horns or a weapon instead and push the target, up to 10 feet away from them. At 5th level, they can make an intimidating charge, once per short rest. In this case, when they hit with a weapon, horns, or a shove, the creature must succeed on a wisdom saving throw or become frightened of the satyr for 1 minute, unless it passes another saving throw it gets to make versus the fear of this each of its turns during the minute. What they don't tell you about the mountain satyrs performing this terrifying charge is that they are a little bit mystically enhanced when they do it. They may have red glowing eyes or have a bestial distortion to their face. Their muscles may swell and they may let out a bray that doesn't sound even a little bit humorous as it splits the air suddenly. It's a jarring shock to the senses right before an actual jarring shock as they barrel full force into you with enough force to shatter bones. Woodland Fawns are not nearly as reckless. They can attempt to hide even when they are only lightly obscured by foliage, heavy rain, falling snow, mist, and other natural phenomena. They can unleash a string of insults laced with subtle enchantments at any creature that can hear them within 60 feet. The creature may not even understand the words, but the enchantment works anyway. They use their enhanced charisma to launch a psychic attack, which the target must beat with a wisdom saving throw or take 1d4 psychic damage and have disadvantage on the next attack roll it makes before the end of its next turn. This damage goes up to 2d4 at level 5, and the Woodland Fawn can do this as often as once every turn, because it's basically exactly like the Vicious Mockery cantrip. Their powers of persuasion just increase with their experience, and they are notorious at having a way with words. In older editions, satyrs made good use of the favourite musical instrument, the panpipes, to cast a variety of bardic magic. Being very active people, the satyrs have a love of physical games, particularly ones that they are based on contests of agility, cunning, and being able to win the crowd over. Even if they are losing the match, they can still basically win the game. Hide-and-go-seek games with fawns are popular with children, and young adults add all sorts of objectives to the contest, with teams playing games of mock espionage and pretend assassinations against each other, having to infiltrate a well-guarded kitchen to beg, borrow, bribe, or steal a fresh hot gooseberry pie, then get back to their base undetected by the other team. You can see why, by the time they're adults, satyrs have their choice of proficiency in either acrobatics, deception, persuasion, performance, or stealth. They play practical jokes on each other all the time, and when not engaged in the art of getting more booze and food for the next party, they relax by composing music, dancing, and playing games of dice, cards, throwing darts, tossing horseshoes, stacking rocks, knucklebones, board games, or telling each other riddles. They're probably the world's foremost experts in drinking games, which is where a few sayings in Dwarven have their origin. If you're ever in Settlestone and drinking with both Clan Battlehammer Dwarves and Uthgard Barbarians, try asking them what it means to say, "Go get your beard tied up with a drinking horn." They're actually talking about passing out drunk thanks to a fawn's drinking games, the fawn being the drinking horn. That region could really have done with the help of the Satyr as they fought against the Drow army of Menzo Baranzan, as the Fey beings are immune to any magic that would put them to sleep and resistant to enchantments, having advantage on any saves against charms. They would be welcome guests. Even the towering barbarians have a lot of respect for their ability to remember great stories of many different tribes and peoples. In their homes at the base of great trees or in abodes, a lot like hobbit holes, the satyrs sit around comfortable wooden furniture, smoking pipes, drinking mead and telling all sorts of stories. They speak Sylvan amongst themselves, which sounds quite Gaelic, but switch to common when they have guests. Their family names and the stories binding them together are ancient, but most satyrs are known by nicknames. They are typically honoured guests in the company of bards and frequently travel to and stay at bardic schools, where they tutor in the ways of music, lyrics, devastating burns, and enchantment magic. Their tactics in using magic to bamboozle foes and then using ranged attacks to cut them down are quite effective and often adopted by young adventurers, and particularly young elves who are not yet trained in the longsword, which takes years to master. While a person skilled in simple cantrips and a well-aimed rock can be fierce enough to at least buy them time to run away. Most races who know the satyrs know that they do not to call on them to aid them in battles. They know that the fawns are few in number and are lovers, not fighters. It goes against their nature. Those who would be more suited to it are willing to fight anyone for any reasons and make terrible soldiers. Nobody expects a satyr to be clean and sober or get much of anything done first thing in the morning. I mean, these are rock stars, not men-at-arms. They can absolutely be relied on to get through enemy lines and come back with valuable intel and a couple of barrels of mead. In Faerun, satyrs often dwell in Brynwood in the Vast, but came into conflict with the local Corrids over territory. In the ensuing strife, both races fell before monstrous creatures. Afterwards, few of the satyrs remained, and word spread far and wide of this tragedy thanks to bards singing the mournful ballads composed about it. Just over 120 years ago, satyrs occupied the northern areas of Chondlewood, where they patrolled the old road in an attempt to ward off human caravans and travellers. Largely without much success, but they sure did steal a lot of good quality wine and cheese. Please hit the like button if you learned something new. Subscribe if you were inspired to add any part of this to your adventures. Check out my Patreon for some exclusive content and all the full scripts for these videos. Buy of my wares on Teespring. Check out Patron Blades for a mighty smooth shave, and as always, thanks for listening, and I'll be back with more for you very soon.